In this video, we will be completely disassembling, cleaning, and repairing this Xbox One Model 1540 that does not read discs. The first step in disassembly will be to remove this side vent cover using a plastic pry tool. Simply start at the back, and once you get it to move a little bit, you can carefully pull out and the tabs will disconnect. As you can see here, this area typically accumulates large amounts of dust. Next, we'll go ahead and remove this plastic support piece found behind the controller sync button by simply sliding it back and removing. The first of the outer shell clips can be found here towards the rear of the console. You'll push in on the top while pulling out on the bottom piece, and you'll hear that snap and see the cases start to separate. Next, I'll use one of the small iFixit shims or anything else you have around just to keep this clip from re-engaging, and then we can release. The next series of clips on the Xbox can be a little challenging if you've not disassembled it before, but they can be disengaged by using the pry tool above the rear vent as seen here. The plastic case is very durable, but I would still use a little caution as to not force it, as it could be broken. Now we need to very carefully lift on the top of the case to disengage the front clips, using extreme caution as there is a ribbon cable for the power and eject buttons on the front. With those clips disengaged, we can spin the console and gain access to the ribbon cable that needs to be disconnected. The ribbon cable loops around the front of the connector. We'll carefully lift on that loop, disengage the lock, and then the ribbon cable can be unplugged. The front bezel of the case can be removed by starting on one side and simply disengaging each of these clips all the way across. Here I'll remove the speaker connector by grabbing it and pulling straight up, using caution not to pull the wires. There is a clip on the back side of the speaker holding it to the upper tin case. To press the clip and the speaker will come straight up. Now we will disconnect this wire from the Wi-Fi/Bluetooth wireless card. Then we will remove the two screws holding it in place. There is a connector on the bottom side of this card, so using a plastic pry tool, we will remove it from the upper case. Now we can go ahead and remove the 8 T9 Torx screws that hold the main part of the Xbox together. Again, using our pry tool, we will go ahead and disconnect the other end of the wireless card wire. The top half of the tin case is now ready to be removed. We'll first lift up on this case and then unplug the connector for the wireless card from the motherboard. With that done, we can now remove the main body of the Xbox away from the lower case. Off camera, I'll clean the plastic parts of the shell as well as the vent piece with hot soapy water and then set in front of the fan to dry. There are 3 torque screws and then a connector holding this front board to the case. The disk drive and the hard drive can be removed by first unplugging the connectors. To remove the support found in the back of the Xbox, we'll first remove this torque screw, and then we can set that aside. Near the front of the unit, there are 2 more supports that can be removed by depressing the tabs. On the bottom side, there are still 4 screws holding together the X-clamp, and then there are 4 more screws holding the motherboard in the chassis. We can now go ahead and remove the motherboard from the lower tin case. Final steps of disassembly will be removing the heatsink and the fan. First, we'll have to unplug the electrical connector for the fan, followed by the fan itself. As you can see, the fins of the heatsink have accumulated quite a bit of dust, which we will later clean out with compressed air. But before that, we'll need to go ahead and remove the X-clamp from the lower portion of the motherboard. This is the final piece that's holding the heatsink to the main board. This can be one of the trickier parts of disassembly. First, we'll take a small flathead screwdriver and start to work the clamp itself off of the lower post. Then in this video, I'm going to use this tool designed for this. It's not required, but it does make it a little bit easier. You want to make sure when you're doing this, you're not using excessive force. You're just working the X-clamp from the post without bending or breaking anything. We can now flip the assembly back over and remove the heatsink. This specific unit is from 2015, and as you can see, the thermal paste does not appear to be in great condition, so it's a good thing that we're going to go ahead and replace it. Clean up the old thermal paste in the area surrounding it, I'm going to go ahead and use 99% IPA or rubbing alcohol in Q-tips. I always save these small containers from takeout food as they work great for this type of application. So now that we've got the majority of the thermal paste cleaned up, we'll go ahead and off camera clean the entire board with compressed air, and then we can move on to cleaning all of the dust and dirt from the fan. In my experience, just basic household Windex and paper towels and Q-tips work best for this. Again, it's tedious work, but it is nice when you get to see the finished result. Here's a look at all the parts cleaned and ready to go, and then you guys can also take a look at how I keep all of the screws and hardware organized during disassembly. Xbox Ones are incredibly easy to work on, but it is important to keep everything organized to help with reassembly. I picked this Xbox up from a garage sale, and upon testing found the disk drive to be non-functional. It would sometimes accept disks, then they would get stuck, or they wouldn't read. There was also some noise coming from within the disk drive, so I've decided to go the route of replacing with a brand new drive assembly versus trying to just replace the laser. I picked this unit up on Amazon for around $28. That said, to go this route, we'll need to remove the original daughter board from the original disk drive, and then swap it into this new drive before installing in the Xbox. The board inside the original disk drive is married to the console, thus requiring us to do this work. If you were to install this drive without swapping the daughter boards, you may be able to play DVDs or music, but not Xbox games. This is not a complicated process, and it does take just basic soldering skills. That said, you still need to proceed with caution, as the internals of the disk drives can be sensitive. To do this, we'll remove the 4 case screws and then lift off the cover of the disk drive. The red and the black wire seen here are what need to be unsoldered from the daughter board. We'll be able to remove these wires with the use of a soldering iron and solder braid. With those 2 wires addressed, we can go ahead and undo the 3 ribbon cable locks, and then there is going to be 3 Phillips head screws, and the daughter board is ready to be removed from this new disk drive. Off camera, we've repeated the steps with the original drive, and will now install that daughter board into this disk drive and we'll be ready to go. To do this, we'll just reverse the steps. We'll hook up all 3 ribbon cables, make sure that the locks are engaged and they're seated correctly, install the 3 Phillips head screws, and then solder the wires back in place. To solder these wires, I use a small amount of flux and a little bit of new solder. And then once installed, I'll clean with rubbing alcohol off camera, and then we're good to reinstall the cover back onto this disk drive. The next step is the always controversial application of the thermal compound. Is it enough? Is it too much? It's always a controversy, but this is what I'm going with. To be safe, I've checked with TronicsFix and he said it was the perfect amount, and we're good to move forward with reinstalling the heatsink. To reinstall the X-clamp, simply connect one leg to a post and then work your way around until all 4 are latched back over the post. Again, important not to force anything, just take your time and you'll get it to lock back in place. As we're reinstalling the disk drive, I do want to mention that there is a foam surround near the front of the disk drive. Off camera, I've removed this foam from the original drive and installed it on the body of this new aftermarket drive that we're installing for correct fitment. It's simply attached with adhesive so it easily peels off and you can stick it back onto the new drive. One of the final steps will be to install the front bezel and ribbon cable. The ribbon cable should be gently slid back into the connector, and the front portion again will loop over that connector, holding it in place as you lock the tab. If done correctly, the cable should look like what you see here. We can now slide the feet of this front bezel into the lower case, and once everything is lined up, we can snap all of these connectors back. It's important to ensure that you have everything just right, because if you mess this step up, you'll have to split the two cases again, which isn't difficult, but it's a bit of a pain to go back and do that at this point. We'll slide this tab back behind the controller sync button, and then snap the vent back in place. Here we have the finished product, still a used console, but much cleaner than when we started, so let's go ahead and test out the repair. The unit powers on, that's a good sign. Let's go ahead and see if it accepts and reads a disk. We can hear it spinning up, that's a good sign. There's the prompt that tells us the system began installing the game. That said, I'd consider this a successful repair. I hope that you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below.